We're wrapping up our series, Parenting Tweets, and we've been looking at the book of Proverbs and short little pithy statements that are in the book of Proverbs that grab our attention when it comes to teaching and engaging our kids. Now, I don't know about you, but one of my wife's favorite shows, I think we've watched it from the very first episode all the way to the very last episode, probably a half a dozen times, is Everybody Loves Raymond. Has anyone in here seen Everybody Loves Raymond? Okay. And you're familiar with the mom, right? Marie Barone. Okay, now, if you are familiar with the TV show, which I'm assuming most of you are, Marie is like this overwhelming influence, like she is smothering her adult children, has caused all sorts of psychological problems and different things. And so when we talk about influencing your children forever, sometimes that's the picture that comes to our mind. We're like, we don't want to do that. But at the same time, have you ever wished that, maybe your toddler, goes to preschool and they come home with interesting stories, or your middle schooler goes to school and you're like, man, I just wish you could just walk with them everywhere. And then if they start to do something that they're not supposed to do, if you're a mom, you give them the nuclear weapon, which is the look. You know what that is, right? That's all it takes. That's all it takes is the look. In fact, quite frankly, if we had more women leaders of countries, when Vladimir Putin, went into Ukraine, if that woman would have FaceTimed him and given him the look, he'd have been like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm backing off. Because literally that puts fear in the heart of children. Look, the only thing that doesn't quite match the look, but is probably a good second place, is the dad throat clear, right? Dads, do you do that? You have the throat clear like, Now, for me, we obviously our daughters are grown, but we have two beagles, and when we let them out, they tend to run off after deer and that type of thing. And it's amazing. We've got these little collars that they beep, right? The first is a beep, and the second, it kind of vibrates to get their attention. And last, it's like, hey, I'm going to shock the crap out of you if you don't come back. And what's funny is, especially my beagle, Max, she loves to be in the wind, right? She smells the wind, and she's smelling something, and I can buzz her, and I can beep her, and I can call her name. But if I do, hey, hey, she pays attention. I don't know what it is about it, but maybe your kids are the same way. You can scream your head off, but the minute you clear your throat, man, they are attentive to what's going on. And so you think about it, you're like, man, if there was a way that no matter where I was, no matter where my kid was, I could be there and I could pop their hand, I could give them the look, I could clear my throat to keep them from making bad decisions. Because that ultimately, right, is as parents, we just want our kids to not make bad decisions. I mean, we want them to make good decisions, but if there's a choice, it's like at least don't make bad decisions. And that's kind of the thought process behind it. But even if you could do that, even if you could be with your kid 24/7, there's a point in time in which you're going to no longer be in this world. And your child will be gone. More than likely, they'll be an adult and you'll be old and all that stuff. But what about then? Then you can't be with them all the time. So as I was wrapping up this series, I thought, you know what? I think we need to wrap up with this, how to influence your children forever, even if you're not present. And we're going to read a verse. Again, it's in the book of Proverbs. We're going to read. It's found in Proverbs, I believe it's chapter 4, Proverbs, let's bring that up. There we go, Proverbs chapter 1, there we go. And the writer of Proverbs is Solomon, and he says this, he says, my child, listen when your father corrects you, right? Those of you that have kids, in fact, really quickly, let me hear all the parents this morning. If you're a parent, let me hear you. All right, see, they're good. You guys apparently had your coffee. So my child, listen to your father when you correct you. And it's like, listen, then don't neglect your mother's instructions. He says, listen, this is so important. When dad says, do it this way, do it this way. When mom says, this is how you do it, you need to listen, you need to engage. Then he says, what you learn from them will crown you with grace and be a chain of honor around your neck. Not a chain like a dog chain, but like a chain of honor. And what he's saying is, listen, these things that I'm giving you, these things that I'm teaching you, these things that your mom is teaching you, they will last you forever if you'll use them, if you'll listen to them, if you'll allow them to soak in. And I love the way that it says it'll be a crown and like this gold necklace around you. It'll be with you forever no matter what, because gold lasts forever. It doesn't tarnish. It doesn't fade away. He's saying, listen, it'll be with you forever. So here's the big idea today. The big idea is very simple. Your influence will outlast your presence. Your influence will outlast your presence. No matter how long you live, your influence will outlast your presence. So, how do you make sure your influence lasts in your child's life? Well, I'm going to teach you 4 things. The first one is a guardrail. The second one is a guideline. The third one is a guidepost. And the fourth one is goalposts. So I'm going to give you those 4 things. Those 4 things, if you as a parent can take those things and teach them, do them, apply them in your children's life, then your influence will outlast you. Whether they're next to you or they're on the other side of the country or whether you've passed away, they will still be present in your child's life if you will do these things. Now, those of you that are non-parenting units, okay? Those of you who are not parents yet, you might go, I'm just going to tap out. No, don't tap out. Engage, because here's the thing. Whether your mom and dad taught you these things or not, you have the ability to place these in your own life. So maybe you're not a parent, but you need to look at yourself and you need to go, okay, do I need to establish this guardrail? Do I need to establish this guideline? Do I need to set up this guidepost? And what type of goalpost do I set up in my life? These things that I'm aiming for, these things that I'm shooting for. So we're going to talk through those 4 things. So the first one is this. When they are children, when they were young, build guardrails. Okay? When they are young, when they're children, build guardrails. You say, why them? Because you can still pick them up and move them, right? When they're small and they're tiny, this is the time to establish these guardrails in their life. Now, if you think about guardrails, the purpose of guardrails is a couple-fold, okay? The first one is to keep you from going off the road. Those guardrails are stout enough to keep you from going off of the road. But at the same time, if you bump into that guardrail, it's going to cause some damage. It's not going to be damage-free. It's going to be sometimes painful, but it will keep you from devastating and ruining your life. And that's what a guardrail is in your child's life. If you will establish that guardrail that keeps them on the road, it keeps them from going off the road. It's still damaging, but it limits the damage, usually to more of like a superficial type thing and some pain for a couple days instead of completely going off the road, flipping your car over and destroying it, burning into a big fireball, right? That's what the purpose of a guardrail is supposed to be. Joshua 1:7. Be strong and very courageous. God is talking to the new leader of the nation of Israel, Joshua. And he says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you and do not deviate from them. He's not saying, listen, here's an idea. Here's a concept that you should follow. He says, listen, this is rock solid truth. Don't deviate from it. Now, what are the things that Moses gave the children of Israel? He gave them the 10 Commandments. He gave them the books of the law. And he finishes, he says, listen, do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left, and then you will be successful in everything you do. So God is saying, listen, if you want to be successful, let me put these guardrails in your life. Do not deviate. Do not turn from the right or to the left. Go down this path. This is the way that you're supposed to go. And these things are going to keep you in line so that you make it to the destination that you actually want to get to. So I want to give you some examples. Every time we go through one of these things, I want to give you an example of what these guardrails may look like. Okay, so here's a couple of guardrails. One thing that we taught our kids when they were little is, listen, you only marry somebody that loves Jesus. Only marry somebody that loves Jesus. You love Jesus, right? That's the most important thing in your life, so only marry somebody that loves Jesus. That's a guard. We're like, listen, here's the thing. Marriage is tough. Can we all agree to that? And when you have a foundational difference that is so completely different on this level, it makes it that much more difficult. And so we're like, listen, marry someone that loves Jesus. Only marry somebody that loves Jesus. Now, let me ask you a question. And those of you that have teenagers, I'm going to step on some feet here a little bit, but that's okay because we're big people, right? We're grown-ups. Here's the thing. If you only date people that love Jesus, then guess what? The likelihood is you're only going to marry somebody that loves Jesus. So if you have kids in your home and they know Jesus and they love Jesus, can I encourage you, can I challenge you to even set that guardrail up? and be like, hey, if they don't love Jesus, why? Why hang out with them? Why spend time with them? Why allow to start happening inside of them if that's not going to be something that can go to its completion? If you can't marry them, then why date them? Well, it's fun. Okay, maybe. Okay, there we go. Everyone's like, oh, wow, okay. Here, so, next guardrail, always tell the truth. Always tell the truth. You think about that, your kids, like, listen, always tell the truth. It's a guardrail. You go, well, it could be a little dangerous sometimes. It could be. You may need to be a little softer with how you communicate the truth instead of just saying, now she's a mommy. Things like that. You can be a little softer with that, but always tell the truth. Another guardrail, do the right thing no matter what. Do the right thing no matter what. It's a guardrail you should establish with your kids. And the last one, show respect to those in authority over you. Show respect. This doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't even necessarily mean you follow them, but you show respect because of the position that they have. And here's the thing, parent, I'll let you in on a secret. Who is the ultimate authority over your child while they're in your home? You are. So if you are teaching them by your behavior, by your actions, that you don't have to respect or honor the authority over them, guess what? When they get old enough, guess who they won't respect, honor, or listen to? So build that into their lives. Build that guardrail. Okay, so those are guardrails. Those are things you can build into your child's life that are meant to stop them from deviating and causing massive, irreparable damage in their lives. So there's a lot of other things. That's certainly not an exclusive list, but there's a lot of other things. So here's the second one. It's guidelines. When they're teenagers, you move from guardrails to guidelines. In other words, you want to give them like specific things, but more in a broad sense. And guidelines are a little different. Whereas if you hit a guardrail, right, you are going to experience damage immediately. You're going to experience the consequences of hitting that guardrail immediately. Guidelines are a little different. Guidelines, if you don't follow a guideline, you may not experience the pain or the consequences immediately. It's more of something that it's not necessarily written down hard in stone, but it's like pretty much this is the direction you need to go. It's kind of like when you teach your kids how to drive and you say, listen, stay within 5 miles an hour of the speed limit. Now, we know the speed limit is what the speed limit is, but if you stay within that 5 mile an hour speed limit, you're usually safe. That's a guideline, okay? It's kind of a squishy thing, but it's pretty specific as well. So here are some things. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 21. Whenever you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear this command behind you. This is the way, walk in it. So put it in your perspective as a parent, all right? When your child is out there and you're not around, they're going to hear you. Be like, all right, mom and dad said if this happens, I should probably do this. I should react this way. It's a guideline that you've established for them. And God does that for us. He's like, listen, there are some things that are hard and fast. Those are guardrails. Those are other things that are a little looser, but it's like this is the direction that you're supposed to go. And so as your kids grow up and they become teenagers, you're not going to be around them all the time. You may not even know who all their friends are. They're going to be out there doing things. They're going to get their license, and they're going to be free. And you're not going to be there. So you need to establish these guidelines so that they hear you in their head when they're making these decisions. So here's a couple of guidelines. Do the hard stuff first. Do the hard stuff first so that you have time for the stuff that you really enjoy. It's one of the things with our girls, we taught them when they would do their homework, and obviously every personality is different. Every personality loves different things, and so with our girls, they would have certain subjects that they really liked and certain subjects that they hated, and because they hated it, we hated it, and tears and crying and wailing and gnashing of teeth when homework was done, right? You know what I'm talking about. And so there were things we said, listen, here's the deal. What homework do you have tonight? Okay, and one of our daughters hated math. We're like, okay, you're going to do math first. I hate it. I know. And we're going to do it first so then you can get it done and over with and enjoy the rest. And so do the hard stuff first. It's a guideline. It's not a hard and fast rule. You get the idea we're talking about here? Do the hard stuff first. Another one, pick friends who will encourage you. Don't just pick friends that you'll have fun with. Pick friends that are going to be encouragers. Some of you, don't say anything, don't point, don't look at your child. Some of you, your kids have friends you can't stand. Right? You're like, these are the most annoying people on the face of the planet. We don't want them in our house. We don't want them around us. But you have to ask the question, are they good for my kids, and are they encouraging my kids? And if that's the case, you're like, hey, we'll deal with the weird noises that the kid makes and the things. It's because, at least they're a good friend. So pick people that will encourage you, all right? Third one, save money, don't spend it all. It's a good guideline. Save your money, don't spend it all. That's something that you can teach them and say, hey, listen, I know sometimes there's going to be things that happen that you want to kind of throw all your money at, but listen, you've worked really hard for that money, so don't waste it all on one thing. Save it and then don't spend all of it. So these guidelines you teach. So there's guardrails, hard and fast rules. The minute you break them, there's going to be a consequence. And there's guidelines. It's a little bit squishier, a little broader. They apply to different situations, and the consequences may not be there all the time. Now, the next one is guideposts. Now, if you are not an outdoorsy person, you may not be familiar with kind of the history of guideposts. Okay, so let me just give you a quick kind of rundown of what guideposts are. Guideposts date back thousands of years. And the idea is that you would have these people that we called them in the early days of moving out west, they were called trailblazers. And that's not just a nice little nickname. It's literally people who would go somewhere where no one had ever gone before. And they figured things out. They were like, okay, this is the way that you should go. That's how they found the gap in the Cumberlands, and they called the Cumberland Gap, if you remember that from history. These people would go out, and what they would do is they would figure out the path, and then they would work their way back. And they would mark trees with a blaze. Either they would put paint on it if they had paint, or they would take the bark off of the tree, and they would have it pointed in the direction that you're supposed to go. And then further down the path, you would see another tree that would have that mark on it. And you knew that you were still on the same path. And if you went for a certain period of time and you didn't see one, you could always go back to the previous one and figure out where you made a mistake. That's what guideposts are. Many, many years ago, when I was younger and a lot stupider, and you'll know why I said that in a second, I took 25 teenage boys into Algonquin National Forest in Canada. Now, if you've ever been up there, it is like hills, mountains, and you would trek this with canoes. Now, canoes, you're like, oh, cool, I like canoeing. Well, you also had backpacks. So you would carry your backpacks, you'd put them in the canoe, and you'd go across these lakes that are in the Algonquin National Park. Now, if you don't know this, lakes typically don't connect with other lakes. So you have to do this thing, it's called portage. Now, portage is the French word for hell. Because what that is you have to pick up your backpack and you put the canoe on your back and you carry it across the land to the next place, okay? That's what we did with 25 teenage boys. That was not fun. But a part of this is you have to learn how to read a map. And not only do you have to learn how to read a map, you have to make sure that you don't miss the trees or the guideposts that tell you where to go. And guess what? At one point in time, we missed it. And we made, and this is fantastic, you'll love this, so there was a 3-mile portage. And imagine 3 miles with a 50-pound backpack and an aluminum canoe on your back. It's awesome. And somewhere about halfway through, we made a wrong turn. And we made that 3-mile portage into a 4.5-mile portage. And that's where the word portage is now burned into my brain because it was awful. And when you miss it, though, you know what we did? We went back and we found the guidepost that we knew was there, and we figured out where we were going. That's the whole purpose of a guidepost. Because believe it or not, when your kids become young adults, they're going to sometimes get lost. They're going to sometimes make decisions that throw them off course. But if you've established these guideposts in their life, they always are going to know how to get back on the path. They always are going to know how to get back on course. Listen to what Proverbs says. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 20 through 22. My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Don't lose sight of them. That's the idea is, listen, don't lose sight of these things that I'm teaching you so that you can always come back to them. And he continues, he says, let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. So here are some examples of guideposts that you can use. No matter what you do, I will always love you as my son or my daughter. That's a guidepost. Listen, no matter what happens in life, no matter what choices you make, no matter what you do, I will always love you as my child. And you can always come back and talk to me. You see what that does? That says, listen, no matter where you go, no matter what's happened, no matter how off course you get, this will always be here for you. And they can come back and get things figured out. Another one is, don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't make the same mistakes I did. You can literally tell them, listen, this is a guidepost in my life that I made a huge mistake and I got off the path here. And so when they come across that and they go, whoa, 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 I remember Mom and Dad did that same thing and it didn't work out for them, so I'm not going to do that. And it's a guidepost for them. It shows them how not to do something. If you ever find yourself in a situation that you can't handle, I'll always be here for you. When you go into that interview, make sure you're giving them guideposts, things that they can navigate through life with. So, guardrails, right? These are things that if you get off course, you turn to the right, to the left, it's going to cause immediate damage, it's going to have consequences. Guidelines, okay, not quite as detailed as guardrails, and the consequences may not be immediate, but it's like, listen, this is the path you want to go. You want them to hear you in their ear as they're making these decisions. Guideposts, give them something they can always come back to and find their way back no matter what. And the last one is goalposts. I'm really hoping that the Colts find some goalposts today. Because, man, they didn't last week. Okay, so goalposts. This is giving your child something to aim for. Something to aim for. Something to strive for. It's intended to inspire them. Things that you look in your child, you're like, listen, God has created you this way, and so I think this. Do you know if you tried this? And so the reality is that each of our kids is unique and different. And I know sometimes it's like, it's tempting to think, man, if my kids were all the same, it'd be a whole lot easier to parent them. But I think God uses our kids to grow us too, right? Because you have to adapt. You have to change how you discipline each kid. And those of you that only have one child, you're like, oh, that's not going to be true. Just come see me after child number 2 and we'll talk. Because they're all different. Even if you have identical twins or triplets, they're all different. And so the reality is that you as a mama or dad, you have to set things up to inspire your children, to give them something to aim for, to give them something to go after in life. Here is the sad part. Often unintentionally, we as parents depress our child's dreams and aspirations. And I'll tell you unequivocally, I absolutely, without question, know that this world does that. Isn't it amazing when you talk to a young child that hasn't really experienced much of the world, how they can do anything? They'll try anything. They'll go after anything. If you say, hey, you can do that, they're like, I can do that. And then they start meeting with the world, and the world's, keep your expectations low, buddy. But some of the most amazing people in our world, especially over the last century and a half, as history has been more significantly recorded, have been people who were told when they were young that they were too dumb, they weren't smart enough, they couldn't do it. Guys like Albert Einstein, who flunked out of elementary school. Okay, seriously? People like Michael Jordan. I know some of you are like, Michael who? Oh, the Space Jam, the original one? Yeah, no. Like the greatest ball player of all time, didn't make his middle school basketball team. Helen Keller, if you're familiar with her, she couldn't speak, she couldn't hear, she couldn't see. She taught herself how to speak, and she actually wrote books and wrote songs. Just an amazing thing, because I believe that God has put inside of us something so unique that is different from every part of His creation. And it doesn't matter what's going on with your child, God has gifted them with certain things to make them special and awesome for Him. And so as a parent, you have to establish those goalposts that they can aim for. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 14, verse 1. I love this. It says, make love your aim. Make love your aim and earnestly desire spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy or you may teach. 1 Thessalonians 4, 11 and 12. Make it your goal to live a quiet life, minding your own business. Listen, just mind your own business, right? Be who you are, mind your own business, live your life, do your thing. Just as we instructed you before, then people who are not believers will respect the way that you live, and you will not need to depend on others. Now, I can't really give you specific examples here because the goalposts that you set for your kids are going to be different than everybody else's, because every goalpost that you set for your kid has to be unique and specific to your child. But let me give you a couple that I share with you guys on a regular basis. One that I share with you all the time: never settle for less than God's best. Never. I mean, no, that's a big generic one, right? But listen, if you could teach your kids that, listen, never settle for less than God's best. If what you're experiencing right now isn't the best, then God's not done yet. And so don't give up. Don't give in. Keep pushing for what He's called you to. The Apostle Paul writes another way. He says, listen, strive every day to achieve the calling that God's placed upon your life. It's this inspiration that you put in them. Another one: treat others as you would want to be treated. You're like, that sounds scriptural. It actually is. Treat each other as you would want to be treated by other people. But the bottom line is that if you are willing to set these goalposts up for your kids, if you say, these are the things that I believe God has for you, no matter if you're around them or not, it will always be there. It will always challenge them. It will always cause them to move further, because that's the aim. That's the high watermark that you set for them in their life. So when your kids are little, when you can still physically pick them up and move them in the right direction, set those guardrails and set them in stone. Because you don't want them to ruin their life because they made a dumb decision that you could have set that guardrail up for them. As they become teenagers, start working those guidelines into your conversations and laying it out and talking about those things. It's a conversation so that when they're not necessarily right there, they will hear your voice and go, okay, that's how I'm supposed to navigate it. Establish those guideposts in your young adult's life, that when they're ready to kind of jump from the nest and fly and take off and do their own thing, they know there's always a place, there's always a spot that they can find their way back, that they can be able to navigate back on the path. And finally, start laying those goalposts out. Say, man, I believe that God has something great for you. I believe that you can do X, Y, or Z. As you establish those guardrails, as you build in those guidelines, as you put those guideposts down and you set those goalposts up, your influence in your child's life will outlast your presence. And no matter where they are, no matter what you're doing, or no matter where you are, you will always still be an influence in your child's life. Now, for those of you this morning that aren't parents, or maybe you are parents, you just need to hear this too. These 4 things are necessary in your life too. There may be some guardrails you need to start building in your own life. Some guidelines you need to establish, and do that from the Word of God instead of what everyone else thinks you should be, or your friend on Facebook. Some guideposts that you need to realize that God has placed in your life. Do you know that God has said that no matter how far away you are, no matter how long you run, no matter what you've done, He will always forgive you and welcome you home? And maybe you need to start setting up some goalposts in your life. Maybe you grew up with a whole bunch of limited mentality, right? There's not enough. You're never enough. You can't do enough. It'll never be that way. Just just do what you can to get by, all these different things. And maybe you need to have a renewing of your own mind and understanding that just like God has gifted your children to do something special and unique for Him, He's gifted you that way too. Because here's the thing, Mom and Dads, as you do that, then you can begin to do that in your child's life as well. Even if you don't have kids, if you begin to do that in your own life, then when God does do that, and God allows you to have some kids or dogs, whatever, you can do that for them too. Because the guardrails, the guidelines, the guideposts, and the goalposts will set you up to be successful and do everything that God's called you to be so that you can become the man or the woman that God has destined